You know, some of the absolute best stories in history are the ones where we're still missing huge chunks of the pages. And today, we're going to dive into one of the biggest mysteries of them all. We're talking about a lost civilization, home to millions of people that just, well, it vanished from human memory for literally thousands of years. And this right here, this little seal, it's one of our only clues. Look at it. It's carved with this fascinating animal and a script that, to this day, nobody can read. It's like a message in a bottle, you know? A message from a huge, advanced world that disappeared from history for over 3,000 years. Just gone. So that brings us to the big question, right? How does a civilization with more than a million people just disappear? I mean, this was one of the three great ancient civilizations, right up there with Egypt and Mesopotamia. How do they just fade away, first into myth and then into nothing at all, leaving behind just silent ruins? Okay, let's talk about how this civilization was rediscovered. And what's absolutely wild is that for pretty much all of recorded history, we had no idea these people even existed. Seriously, it was a complete blank. It wasn't until about 100 years ago that archaeologists started stumbling upon the very first clues of this incredible forgotten world. And when they started finding things, it all happened incredibly fast. In 1921, an archaeologist named Dayram Sani started digging at a place called Harappa. Just a year later, another team unearthed similar ruins hundreds of miles away at Mohenjo-daro. And then boom, by 1924, the Director General John Marshall made this huge announcement to the world, basically saying, hey, we've just discovered an entirely new ancient civilization. It completely rewrote the history books. So, the two main players you need to know are Dayram Sani, who was at Harappa, and R.D. Banerjee, who was at Mohenjo-daro. And these two places, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, were so important that the whole civilization is often called the Harappan civilization, named right after that first city they dug up. All right, so now we're going to get into the empire itself, an empire along the Indus. And the first question is, just how big was this place? Let me tell you, the scale is just, it's mind-boggling, way, way bigger than anyone ever thought. Now, we're not talking about some little kingdom with a few towns here and there. No way. This was a massive, sprawling civilization. We've found hundreds of sites, all clustered along the Indus River and all the smaller rivers that feed into it. The sheer number of these settlements tells you this had to be a super organized and really populous society. And to really put that size into perspective for you, check this out. The civilization stretched about 1,600 kilometers from west to east and 1,400 from north to south. That's a huge area. It was, geographically speaking, the largest of all the ancient urban civilizations. Get this, it was bigger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. That's just incredible. So, when was all this happening? Well, the Indus Valley Civilization was at its absolute peak right around 2500 BC. We're talking 4,500 years ago. And what that means is, while the Egyptians were busy building the Great Pyramids at Giza, these guys were building their own incredible cities. They were contemporaries, existing at the exact same time. All right, Section 4, cities ahead of their time. And honestly, this might be their single greatest achievement. Their cities weren't just big, they were brilliantly designed, like almost impossibly well designed for their time. And what's really amazing is how consistent the layout was across hundreds of different sites. You'd usually have this fortified upper area, called the citadel. That's probably where the elites lived and where they had important public buildings, like massive granaries. Then, down below that, you had the lower town, which was this bustling grid of workshops and houses for all the regular folks. The planning itself was just, wow, so precise. The streets were laid out in an almost perfect grid pattern. You had main roads running north-south and east-west, all intersecting at perfect right angles. To have that kind of uniformity across such a gigantic area, that tells you there must have been some kind of powerful central government calling the shots and that they were masters of urban planning and geometry. And their engineering genius didn't stop there. Just look at their sanitation systems. They built one of the world's very first urban drainage systems. Think about that. Most of the houses were actually connected to a central network of covered drains that ran right under the streets. That kind of public hygiene was completely unheard of back then. It really shows you this was a society that cared a lot about health and order. So you might be asking, how did their buildings last so long? Well, here's the secret. They used these super high-quality kiln-fired bricks. Now, their neighbors over in Egypt were using sun-dried bricks, which are just not as durable. But the Harappans, their fired bricks were incredibly strong. And, this is key, they were all standardized to the same size. That was a huge technological jump that let them build stuff that's still standing thousands of years later. Okay, so we've talked about the cities, but what about the people themselves? Who were these people living in these amazing places? Well, the artifacts they left behind give us some really fascinating clues about their society, what they cared about, and just how they lived day to day. When you start looking at all the things they left behind, the pottery, the beautiful jewelry, even little toys for kids, and of course, those intricate seals, a picture starts to emerge. You see a really complex, vibrant society. Every single one of these artifacts is like a little window, giving us a peek into their daily lives. So, what do these artifacts tell us? Well, for one, they suggest a society with clear social classes. You had the elites up in the citadel, then a booming middle class of merchants and craftspeople, and then the laborers. Also, and this is pretty cool, we found so many female figurines that some experts think it might have been a matriarchal society, though that's still up for debate. We know for sure they were trading by sea all the way to Mesopotamia. And get this, they were the very first civilization on Earth to figure out how to grow and weave cotton. And this is probably one of the most famous things ever found from the Indus Valley. It's the dancing girl. Now, she's tiny, only about 10 centimeters tall. But just look at her, that confident, relaxed pose. It just speaks volumes about the incredible artistic skill of the people who made her. She's become this powerful symbol of a civilization that really, really valued art and culture. Okay, but for everything we've found, all the amazing cities, all the beautiful art, the civilization's biggest secret is still out there. It's hidden in plain sight, on thousands of tiny artifacts, just taunting us. And that brings us right back to their script. We see these symbols everywhere, on thousands of seals, on pottery, on little tablets. They had a written language. They could record their history, their business deals, their stories. But here's the kicker. With all of our modern technology, nobody has been able to crack it. It's one of the last great undeciphered languages from the ancient world. We just can't read it. So their cities tell us a story of incredible order and genius, right? Their art gives us these little glimpses into their culture. But without their words, their actual language, we're left with so many questions. We don't even know what they called themselves. We don't know who their kings or queens were or what gods they prayed to. The story is just incomplete, which leaves us wondering, what secrets are still locked away in that silent script? And what will it change about what we know of human history when someone, someday, finally cracks the code?